Hi, this is Vicki Fairchild. I'm back with my sister Selma, and we are talking about the grief process in this segment. We're going to talk about those feelings that she identified, some of them actually in our previous segment, associated with grief and with raising a child who has disabilities. And I want to start with fear because
Okay.
you already touched on that. You touched on that fear you had when Joshua was diagnosed. So tell me about those feelings.
I think the main fear is not knowing how to raise him, not knowing really his disability yet, learning who he was and wanting him to be happy and not knowing if I knew how.
Yeah. Did this fear come and go? Was it there omnipresent?
I think just mostly at the beginning
Yeah.
because as you go along the journey with your child and he is who he is and you realize you just adore him for who he is, even though he's extremely hard, the fear for me went away. Although there were times that it would come back depending on the situation,
Right.
you know.
And it was really strong at the initial stages.
Yeah.
How am I going to do
And
this?
I don't know if I diagnosed it as fear.
Right.
Recognized it, not diagnosed it. I don't know if I recognized it as fear.
Right. And fear comes with anxiety sometimes. They're pretty closely tied, but they're different because anxiety is like that tension, of what am I going to do and how am I going to solve this? Did you experience some of that as well? Or
I don't remember the anxiety part other than sometimes if I dealt with the public or people who didn't understand him, then I would get a little nervous
yeah, but
or protective of my
Right.
boy.
Right, right, and decidedly so because he was your boy.
Yeah.
And you're taking him out into the world
Yeah.
and wanting the world to interact with him in a kind way.
Right, exactly.
And
Yeah.
so sometimes bringing your child into
Yeah.
a vulnerable situation,
Yeah.
it might feel like.
Right,
Having that anxiety that things are going to be okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do remember a time when he was in a class and with normal children, and I was there to help him because he couldn't talk and he couldn't understand everything.
Right.
And the teacher was throwing a beanbag to each child to ask a simple question. Well, I knew that Joshua wouldn't know the answer.
Right.
But what happened was she must have known he also didn't know the answer because she didn't throw him the beanbag.
Oh.
And I'm like, in my heart, throw him the beanbag.
Right.
But I was still a young mom and if I had to do that again right then, I would have said, throw him the beanbag.
Include him.
Because he still wanted the beanbag. Now he would have thrown it probably at somebody, and that experience stuck with me for a long time because I wanted him to always be thrown the beanbag.
Right. I've never heard that story.
Yeah. It was a light bulb day, you could say, where I was going to make sure that didn't happen again.
That he got to
Get the beanbag.
I think you're touching on something that we don't always understand with regards to children with special needs is that importance of being included.
Included. Yeah. I don't know his understanding at that level. It was even lower, but I do believe he knew he was left out.
And you knew
I knew he was left out.
And you want him to be part of the group.
Right.
To be included in the group.
To be included.
So one of the things I also wanted to talk about, because it's something that I have come to understand more as a professional, is the issue of denial. Because when we talk about grief, sometimes, and I admit this before in a video, that we don't understand denial from the perspective of the parent. Because I think what sometimes educators might look at as denial is just, you don't know.
Right.
When Joshua was diagnosed, initially it was developmental delay, and then it was the autism later.
Right.
And you had no idea how that was going to manifest when he was 9,
Right.
when he was 12, when he was 15. I mean, seeing the road wasn't evident. It was just blurry.
No, and even so, every child, even with a diagnosis, will have their own
Right.
understandings.
So I've come to realize that it's just an unknown. You don't know.
It is an unknown, and it is a little. It's very scary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I wish we could really process with parents is when we're giving sometimes these initial diagnoses at age 3 and age 6, there's no way you can know. There's
No.
what that's going to lead to.
I think there's that initial relief that I'm not just making this up,
Right.
that there really is something wrong. And if you get a diagnosis, for me, it was a relief to get a diagnosis because then I felt I could help him better.
Right. Because you knew.
Yeah, then I could
What he
look.
needed.
I could educate myself more. I could now work with teachers who understood and who were fabulous, and just give him a good life.
Right. Exactly what you want to do.
That's what I wanted to do.
You wanted to give him a good life, and that helped you do that.
Yeah.
But knowing where that life was going to lead, that was too much for you to process.
I don't even know if I would have understood too much to process. I think I was just going, forward day by day.
Right. Not looking 10 years, 15 years.
And trying to, be have a normal family,
Right.
if there is such a thing. But, and do normal family things, even though they were definitely harder.
Right.
With Joshua.
So, going to another feeling of grief that I don't know if I ever saw in you or remember seeing in you, but I've seen in other parents, and maybe you kept it inside, is anger. Did you ever feel angry?
I actually never did.
Okay.
I did not feel anger with Joshua. I felt more pain and fear, probably, and inadequacy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I don't remember the anger feeling.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I believe we all have different feelings.
Right.
And even when you talk about grief, I had no idea I was going through grief at that time. I've learned a lot. When you look backwards,
Right.
you learn a lot.
Right.
But at that time, it would have been helpful for me if someone said, you might be going through grief right now because you cry easily. Of course, I still cry when I talk about it.
Now, sadness. The crying easily. Let's talk about that. What were some of those things that could bring on the tears?
The things that could bring on the tears maybe would be more his progression. His younger brother, Jeremy, when he started passing him up, it was such a joy in one way.
Right.
Because he was, wow, this is all I dreamed it would be. And he was this cute, obedient child who was very mature for his age.
He was very mature.
And
he was an old soul.
He was always helpful to Joshua from a young age.
Right.
And so I had a 4- and 2-year-old at the store, and I'm chasing the 4-year-old,
Right.
and the 2-year-old's helping me. And I know that was a huge thing, and it was wonderful. It did show me the difference in the two boys.
Right. So just looking at the progression would bring on sadness. Were there any incidents that you remember where you suddenly felt that sadness?
I think when he wasn't talking,
Right.
and his understanding was definitely delayed. When he was not toileting, toilet training was not going well, and that is hard when you realize that this 4-year-old and now 5-year-old and on can't get out of a diaper.
Yeah.
That was something we tried for many, many years. He just couldn't get it. And so that is all those things you start realizing, wow, I'm still changing diapers. I had no idea how old
Right.
he would get to that stage. But all those different stages, and even regular things like maybe joining a little team, a
Right.
Parks and Rec team. At that time, he didn't, because to
Right.
me, I was still trying to figure out what to do with him.
So wanting him to be included,
Right.
wanting him to do those typical things,
Wanting him to have fun and enjoy life
And not-
just be, and he had a sweet, happy personality.
Right.
And then wanting him to hug me.
right?
And I will tell an experience
Oh,
about
please
that.
tell an
because
experience.
I believe it was about 2 years that every night before he went to bed, I put his arms around my neck and I made him hug me. I know it wasn't a true hug, but at least he was doing it. And so one night my sister Anna was over visiting, and she was there when I put Joshua to bed, and he gave me his first real hug. Because I remember we both were like, he hugged me, and she's like, he hugged you.
Yeah.
And he hugged me, and I had no idea of the impact of those hugs for the rest of his life. Those hugs were the start of who he was.
Yeah.
But it took 2 years.
Of teaching him how to give you that that tight hug.
Yeah, and it was the best hug. It was an incredible hug.
Let's also talk about guilt, because this is something I have seen a lot of parents struggle with, because they kind of take on responsibility for the disability, and I've seen guilt for, one, they might think they did something wrong in the pregnancy.
Right.
I've seen guilt for the fact that they don't know how,
Right.
you know. I've seen guilt for trying to manage the schedule. You know, I have more than one child. I'm not giving enough to my special needs child, but
Yeah.
my other children are feeling neglected. And this is a part of the struggle that most people don't get, is that guilt that kind of is there. Now, I know you felt guilt. I'm not even going to ask her.
I think, and women, I'm sure men do too,
Right.
but we can feel guilt easily when
Right.
things don't go right. But I think the things I remember feeling the most guilty or wondering was, so my first pregnancy was a miscarriage.
Yeah.
Before Joshua, and I didn't know I was Rh negative.
Okay.
I had an older physician, and I don't think I got a ROGAM.
Okay.
And for those of you who know what that is, I never realized that till like 10 years later.
Uh-huh.
So I always wondered, was it because I didn't get a ROGAM shot?
Yeah.
You know, you just wonder, what did I do? Why isn't this child? The other thing I wondered about was I was extremely ill with Joshua, with morning sickness, to the point of sometimes not being really, really bad. And the doctor gave me something to help with the nausea so I could function. And I always wondered about that also.
How did you let that go?
I believe I let that go when I believe he was about 4 or 5 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I just had a very strong feeling that Joshua was who he was supposed to be. And I knew he was supposed to be who he was, and to stop searching for why he wasn't progressing. I mean, why? Those kind of reasons. And to just go forward and enjoy who he was.
Because you couldn't change it.
I couldn't change it.
And
it was okay.
That's so hard. I think that's so hard, because I've seen parents wanting, you want to know why. I've been asked that.
Right.
Why is my child like this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
Your
it's okay. I'm really okay with not knowing why. But at that initial stage, you want to know what happened and how much that's going to affect him.
Right. That's really profound, that Joshua was who he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And to celebrate
I wouldn't ever
and love
change him. Not one part of him would I ever change, except for, I absolutely loved every part of who he was.
So let's talk about the other guilt. So there's that guilt, and then there's just like the daily little things that can creep in. How do you deal with that?
I don't think I went through, a lot of guilt with that, and I believe it was because when I was working, he was well cared for.
Yes.
By his grandma and grandpa. And I, in my heart, felt I did all I could.
Yeah. And I think just, I wish I could tell, well, and I have told parents, but I wish more parents understood that they're doing amazing, amazing jobs.
And I think you
with
have to
their
understand,
kids.
with doing all you can doesn't mean the outcome is going to be exactly what you want.
Right. And it doesn't mean that you aren't going to have hard days, and it doesn't
Right.
mean that you aren't going to need breaks, and it doesn't mean
Right.
that
You're going to need some break.
you're going to be a human
Yeah.
being, and you're doing the best you can.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different for every parent.
Right.
And so many times looking from the outside in, we don't see all those struggles.
Right.
You know, we don't know what it took to get the child in the car to get to the grocery store.
That brought back some good memories.
We might have to go.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, the grocery store with Joshua. And some of the comments, guys. I think we're in a
We've
better.
heard some good ones.
I think we're in a better place.
Yeah.
As far as the understanding of people with disabilities.
Yeah.
But back then, there could be some pretty harsh comments.
There were some harsh comments, but
Yeah.
there were some beautiful comments.
Right.
To outdo, kind of put those together.
Right. But I want to go back and just really, I hope people will let that sink in about just that acceptance of he was who he was supposed
Yeah.
to be.
And
that's what we want, that outcome after dealing with those rough emotions
right.
to be, that acceptance of this is who he's supposed to be.
Right.
It doesn't take away the hard times.
No, it doesn't take them away, but it does help them.
Yeah. It helps us to celebrate
Right.
him and love him
Yeah.
and hopefully help the world to love him.
It does. And our brother Glenn, at our parents' 50th anniversary, Joshua did something funny during the program. I don't remember what, but it definitely was unusual. And there were people there that didn't know him. And Glenn said, "Oh, that's Joshua. He makes this family better."
Yeah. And he did.
And he did.
And he did.
He did.